welcome to our Roundtable AI Marketing Tools. This is a pretty sweet collaboration brought to you by several amazing organizations. mConnexions Marketing Agency, SuperWebPros, Startup Grind Lansing, Expert Connections, and Lansing Marketing Hackers. I'm Julie Holton. I'm your host and moderator today, joined by two of my favorite techies and AI enthusiasts, Julie Flores and David Smith. Hello, guys, and welcome. We're going to make this entire hour, this lunchtime hour today, a conversation in addition to our panel discussion. So while our audience is taking a minute to say hello, guys, let's give some brief backgrounds on who we are, what we do, and why we are having so many conversations right now about AI and why we're bringing those conversations out in the public to the forefront to really start having this collective community conversation. So Julie Flores, I'm going to start with you, sir. Hello, thanks for joining us.
Hey, awesome. Super grateful to be here. And thanks for having me on here. Gosh, so who am I? So I am the Chief Web Pro for SuperWebPros. We build websites for small and growing businesses. But honestly, we've got a pretty deep and rich technical background. I've been thinking about artificial intelligence and machine learning for a little while. And it's been, as a developer, it's been really exciting to see some tools come available that are making it easier for us to do more with less, not only for ourselves, but for clients. We've got a bunch of really interesting things that we're working on right now.
Yeah, and I can't wait to kind of peek back behind the curtains and see what you're working on, Julie. You know, we've talked a lot about it. Even this morning already, you were telling us more things you're doing. So we'll get to that within the hour. David, why don't you give a little hello and tell us who you are and what you do and your interest, how you're using AI?
Sure. I'm a super tech nerd. So my interest in AI started, gosh, probably in the 90s. And Julie, we were watching a TV show the other day and they were talking about, building computers back in the 80s and how they were talking about AI back then. And it was always like, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And I was a software developer professionally and then an angel investor. So I've been thinking about the future and thinking like, as almost here. Now it's really here. Now everybody on this call will be able to use AI right now. It's so cool. It's a tool that I'm using every day. Jesse's using it a ton. You're using it. So I think it's going to be a really helpful call for everyone here to pick up a new tool in their tool belt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love your excitement. Just a quick shout out to those who are already attending. So glad you guys could join us. Let us know who you are, what you do, whether AI is something you're already incorporating into your work, whether you are excited about it, maybe you've got some fears about it. Dave, you mentioned that we've been talking about, the world has been talking about AI. It feels like forever now. And it's here. And I bet in some ways people are already using it and don't even know that they're using some of this technology in what has become everyday things. So really excited to dive into that. Quick moment to say about who I am. I am Julie Holton. I'm the owner and principal strategist of mConnexions Marketing Agency. We are a full service marketing firm located in Lansing. We work very closely with the folks over at SuperWebPros. So really excited to team up, Julie, with you and your team for this series. I'm also the host and executive producer of a TV show now on YouTube called Expert Connections, where we have conversations just like this. So take a moment, head to YouTube, like and subscribe to our page. Some of you may also recognize me as the newer co-director of Startup Grind Lansing. So excited to see a lot of you folks here today with a lot of really exciting things happening in our region here in Greater Lansing. And so really excited to be pulling Startup Grind and all of our global resources into this conversation as well. Startup Grind, fun fact, is the world's largest startup community made up of startups and those who support them. So really glad to have you guys here. If you are not connected with Startup Grind Lansing, head to startupgrind.com/Lansing and make sure to get on our email list. Last but not least, I am also repping Lansing Marketing Hackers here today. I see Chad on the call, one of our other hosts. We are a community of marketers and techies who love to put our heads together and collaborate, just like we're doing today, brainstorming, talking about all of these changes in this ever-evolving world of marketing. Today, we're here to talk about AI. So let's dive in. If you have questions, comments, want to add to the conversation, again, chat box is open. Make sure and jump in there and join the conversation there. So Julie and Dave, I want to start first with talking about what is AI? I recognize we have a lot of attendees joining today who this is brand new to them, may not know, like we said earlier, how they're even incorporating AI into their daily lives. So Jesse, why don't you kick us off? What is AI and how does it work?
Yeah, gosh, man, couldn't have started with an easier question, huh? So I'll tell you what AI is not. AI is not magic, right? I think that's one of the first things that people, especially if you've just now started to see, anything with ChatGPT, or you've seen things and you've seen it and it looks amazing, but it isn't magic, right? AI is fundamentally about computers being able to do really complex computations very, very quickly. And it can feel and look like magic, but it's really a lot of math and statistics under the hood to generate what it thinks are sort of probabilistically great responses or great outcomes to solve a specific problem. And as of today, really AI can be broken down into kind of two types. Like there is generalized AI and specific AI, right? Specific AI is an AI designed to solve a specific type of problem, and we'll get into that later on. Generalized AI would be what we would imagine like the sentient AI of like Terminator or, iRobot or something. We are not near generalized AI. What we have right now are really interesting, sophisticated, specialized AIs, but it's really just computers being able to do really interesting statistical modeling that produces computationally interesting results using large amounts of data. But that's really what it is. It's really interesting data science brought to an interface that anybody can access.
Dave, what are some common types of AI? Jesse touched on a little bit of how it works and where we're seeing it. What are some common types? What are some places that people might expect to see it?
Before last year, you're probably hearing a lot about it. People, Twitter using AI, the algorithm, Facebook, AI was being used kind of on us. And last year, the cool thing that happened is now we can use AI. So you can use it for, transcription, for creating photos. I think a lot of people, like you included, have used Lensa, where, all of a sudden it's coming into these consumer tools. ChatGPT launched, I think in November or something. And within 1 week, it had over 1 million users. This thing is almost like a Google where you type in, hey, what's the difference between should I splint or buddy tape my fingers? And it'll tell you, a little short paragraph as if a person was telling it to you. You put into Google and you get some medical diagnosis or who knows what. ChatGPT is this amazing tool it's almost like talking to a person. And we've seen it with cars now. Even my car can drive around, and that's using AI. But I think the big things today are a lot around text generation, audio transcription, and image generation.
I wonder who was searching, by the way, that ChatGPT question Dave threw out there. Yeah, Jesse, jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that domain that Dave's talking about is what's called natural language processing. And this has been a really, really difficult problem for a variety of reasons, right? Because communication is inherently hard. Julie, you're a communications professional. You probably know this more than the rest of us, right? And what Dave is talking about with particularly ChatGPT, which is the one that's gotten all the buzz, I think there are two really interesting things there. So one is that they have made the most progress in making natural language processing accessible to anybody. And it's a really difficult problem, as anyone who's ever had to communicate knows. But the other thing that they've done is they've made the interface so accessible that your grandma, if you show her ChatGPT, your grandma can use it, right? And she might have fun playing with it, But those two things are, I think, are really sort of the monumental things. That natural language processing, very, very difficult problem, and this demonstrates that problem's gotten much easier to solve. And then the interface has been difficult to solve too, and now we're starting to see interfaces that are easy for anybody to use.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if anyone caught it, but we, at the very end of that intro video, if you tuned in late, you didn't get to see it, I'll pull it up here. But at the very end of that intro video, we included some kind of blooper images that have been generated of us for, by using AI. So let me share my screen here and show you. So here's one of me. I think it's quite lovely, frankly. It has slimmed my face. It looks beautiful until you look closely enough and you see that I suddenly have 6 fingers. Dave, can you comment on, you've been generating a lot of images really, and you've been working on images for a long time in various programs using different AI tools. Talk about even training the computer, training the intelligence, if you will, like teaching it how to do things like not give someone 6 fingers.
Yeah. And so like Jesse said before, there's these different, how AI works is that it learns. And so what you want to do is give it a bunch of data, almost like, if you've got kids and you teach them how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the more times that they see you make that peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the better they're going to get at it. And the cool thing with actually with kids or with AI, they're not great all the time, but they get better over time. And if they make a million peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, they're going to be great. Same thing with AI. But the one cool thing about AI today is that, if you have 100 kids and you tell them all to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it's hard to get 100 kids and hard to get all those ingredients and everything. But with AI, you can say, hey, make 1,000 images, and it can just, spin it up in a few minutes, and you can just pick out the good ones. You can say, oh my gosh, those images are better than what I would have made. The other really interesting thing is a lot of times people think, computers are stupid and just follow, directions, which has been exactly what they've done. But the interesting thing about AI is that it's really creative. So you might say, make a picture of an astronaut, and it might just do something, crazy, and you're like, oh wow, that's a great idea, and you can use that and refine it. So it's almost like a brainstorming. A better example probably is around Christmas gifts. I could say, what are some example. Give me some gift ideas for for like a 40-year-old female who's my girlfriend or something like that, and see what it kicks out.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it kicks out a version of Jesse that looks like this, which I don't know, Jesse, maybe pink makeup is the new color for you.
You know what?
Yeah,
my daughter would love this. She's been asking to do this makeover for years. And so now like the AI could do it without me having to incur the humiliation on my own. So, I can show this to her and be like, hey, we did the makeover.
and so getting back to the training, which is what you asked about, that's like the hard part in AI. And that's the unfun part in AI. And one of the reasons ChatGPT is so successful is because it just skips that whole training part. So you just log into ChatGPT and you just ask it a question and it answers it. So that's fun. The harder part now is if you want to train it, like you got the 6 fingers there, because the training's not so great and AI is not doing such a great job of understanding what a person is, but that's just going to get better and better and better as time goes on. And it's really, really easy to imagine. And the rate of change, from last year to this year, is just light years. Or even a few months ago, when I was trying to train the thing versus, training it this week on images, it's just light years ahead. And thinking where we're going to be in a year or 5 years, and you're just saying, create me a Star Wars movie starring, Jesse, Julie, and Dave, and it being able to just pop that out, it's gonna be unbelievable what these tools are going to be able to do, in a really short time here.
On the one hand, you're right. Like we don't have to train it to use ChatGPT, but Microsoft has put $1 billion into data scientists who are training it on our behalf. Right. And so it's not that it's not being trained. It is being trained. It's just that is hidden from us by the interface. And if you want to use it for even more specialized applications, you would have to embark on your own sort of training paradigm. Right. So I just want to make sure that that part is clear, is that, yes, as users, we don't have to train ChatGPT, but by using it, we're actually still refining the model. Right. So there is this thing called reinforcement learning, which is part of AI training. And anytime somebody is using a particular tool, this tool will get smarter. But there are $1 billion worth of data scientists over there who are steering this helm. It's just that we don't see them.
Yeah, and that's probably why, Jesse, I would venture to say that ChatGPT has grown even in name recognition. Someone on my team was mentioning the other day that she was included on an email chain between family members talking about ChatGPT, and these were family members that she wouldn't have them. And she said, "Oh, by the way, come join our webinar later this week." So I think for sure ChatGPT is gaining name recognition. Also, a number of different programs out there, like what Dave was talking about with images and being able to create those model images and then work to refine how that AI technology is then using those models and as it's doing certain things you don't want it to do. For instance, adding on 100 pounds. I don't know why it likes to do that to women who, I'm not naming names, but I certainly don't like when that happens. but anyway, just as an example of training it, and it's really also training ourselves in how to use this technology. The next kind of conversation I want to get into here is talking about using AI as a tool instead of as a replacement, especially as things stand right now. That's one of the themes of the conversations that we've all been having is, at this point, if you're looking for AI to just generate images for you, you may not know what you're going to get, especially because we are still learning, myself especially, what to type in, what keywords are going to trigger various changes within the results that you get. And I think right now there's an art form to really figuring out the right words to use and the way to, string some of these keywords together. Thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, I think like Jesse said at the top of it, it's not magic, and it's a tool. So, we could all dig ditches before shovels were invented, but it's just gonna be really hard, and take days. And all of a sudden, the shovel takes this task that's gonna take us, 5 days and get our fingernails all messed up. And all of a sudden, we can do it in, maybe 4 hours. And AI is that same way. I can have it make a poem, for you, Julie, and that might take me, who knows, months or something to get something, 10% as good. But I can just, pop in, the key ideas, like, oh, I love your eyes and your beautiful lips and that you're smart. And it pumps out, a great poem using, the general directions that I gave it. And it really fills in those details and does a great job of that. And then there's that creativity part. And so you can use it as a partner. And so it can just pop out this poem and you can say like, oh, well, change the fourth verse there. And then boom, it gives you another fourth verse. And if you don't like it, you just change it again. And imagine doing that with somebody that you hire. I would have had to hire somebody to do that. And imagine that back and forth and how long that's going to take and for them to think about it versus just doing that in a few seconds, on your computer. And that's really the power that it gives people today is really being able to be creative and to do a lot of work really quickly, but to pump out these drafts that need to be, refined and tweaked and be prepared for nonsensical answers. Like, it might, you might say, make a poem about my beautiful girlfriend. And it might say, she looks like an elephant or something. And you're like, you never would want to send this stuff out without looking at it today.
Yeah. To your point, Julie, about prompt engineering, there is definitely an art form for it. So there are two things that came to mind when you made your comment. One is, I don't know if prompt engineering is a term. We use it internally, and I'll explain why in a second. And the second is interface, right? So again, what ChatGPT has done that's interesting and why it got so big so fast is anybody could go and play with it. My 12-year-old plays with it, right? And so so it's interface and prompt engineering. Now, the reality is you can absolutely do novelty things with it, like write poetry or write songs, and you can do that, right? And that's fun. But you can also do it for real application. So for example, can I do my screen really quickly? So for instance, we're working on an application currently that is, let me see here. So we're basically building a wrapper on GPT. We're not using chat, we're using a different one, but we're building a wrapper on GPT to bring into WordPress as a WordPress plugin, right? Well, we learned very quickly that the quality of the prompt directly impacts the quality of the response, right? And so we know that we have to provide a good prompt to get a good response. But we also know that people are not going to sit around and watch videos on how to generate good prompts, right? And so what we started to do is we started to say, well, let's try and build an interface where we can potentially provide prompts that are relevant to the domain. So if someone clicks on it, it starts to pre-fill out the prompt. So the interface is simple enough that anybody can click a button and start generating the prompt, but the prompts are pre-configured in a database. So we're engineering good prompts from the beginning, right? Because again, this is not magic. It is really, it's data, it's math, it's code. And in this particular case, the code takes one parameter really, which is called the prompt. And if that parameter isn't good, you're not going to get a good response. And then we know building the tool, we have to make it really easy for people to be able to get a good prompt so they get a good result in order to make the tool productive enough to get traction. And now in our case, we spend so much time trying to gather content on websites. And oftentimes it's one sentence, it's a headline, it's 3 sentences, it's this, that, and the other. And so by bringing this tool into the environment where we're working, we're able to start cutting down the cycles of communication from days or weeks to minutes. And then we'll roll this out so everybody else can enjoy the benefits that we're creating for ourselves as well. And so, Julie, to your point about the art form, part of this is about, having interfaces that will hide the necessary complexity of the art form so other people are able to use it, at least in this particular domain. And there are many other domains like that where there will be opportunities to have wrappers on top of these things in order to make it easier for people to use and adopt.
Jesse, what an incredible way that you and your team are jumping in using this technology to help your clients, as well as, my understanding, this is going to be a tool that will be available for others that are, using WordPress. What an incredible way, a great, example of a startup idea here to jump in on AI. So I want to continue this conversation kind of down this marketing path, because this is a great example, Jesse, of incorporating ChatGPT with WordPress. And really one of those slowdowns in kind of agency life that you and I talk about, behind the scenes of our working with our clients, where, it can be so hard to visualize, like, what is my website going to look like? If I don't see my content within this blueprint, if I don't see my photos, my words, things that sound like me, it can be really hard to visualize. And as you and I know, that can take, and anyone here who does any kind of content creation, any website work, that can add anywhere from a week to multiple weeks, months onto the production of a website, yeah. Right? Which we're talking time, which equals money. Not to mention, that on the side of the clients, the sooner they have a website, the better, more profitable they are as well. So we're talking time and money on both sides of this. So let's talk about some other ways that AI is being used right now already to improve marketing efforts. We have, and I'm just going to list through a few things, and you guys jump in as some of these things really sound like launching points. And those of you in the audience, excuse me, Harrison, thank you for jumping in. Love this podcast. I'm going to save this to check it out. Getting AI to express emotion sounds like, again, a topic we'll kind of put a note in that, because there's so much question about AI content, and will it sound personalized enough? Will it sound robotic? Will it sound like me, like how I want to sound? Like when we're talking specifically about content and use of words as it's creating text. So how is AI being used right now? Chances are you are already, depending on the programs you use, it's being used to generate predictive analytics, right? AI can be used to analyze customer data, predicting future behavior, allowing us as marketers to really target our efforts more effectively. This is a great example of a program like ChatGPT or some of these others. I'm of course drawing a blank on some of these names, right? But all at our fingertips. This is a really great example of them being used as tools. There's a lot of talk in agencies about whether jobs are on the line, whether we need to worry about the future of our agencies. And the reality is, ChatGPT is the equivalent of Canva. When Canva first came out, and people everywhere started using these templates, and suddenly everyone's a graphic designer. Well, really soon, I think the reality sunk in that it might be fun for everyone to use a graphic design program like Canva, but not everyone has the style, the design, the eye for design that it needs in order to create graphics that are going to work, right? Anyone, my 11-year-old niece, I taught how to use Canva years ago. She made beautiful business cards. Did it have all of the information it needed to have? Did it have the design that's really going to catch someone's attention? Could she jump in and create an advertisement that's really going to win? Not yet, right? She hasn't learned those tools yet. Canva is a tool. AI, however, can be used to assist marketers in doing their jobs. I mean, guys, the amount of time it takes to pour through spreadsheets and pour through data manually to figure things out versus what we can capture using AI in a short amount of time. Jesse, I know that whether it's predictive analytics or campaign optimization for ads, this is something that you've also focused on. Tell us about this a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny, you were talking about, being able to manage these things effectively. And I was thinking to myself, I was chuckling a little bit, or ineffectively in some cases, right? So I'll put my screen on here again in a second, but we sort of learned this recently. We were working on a YouTube ad campaign, right? And out of the gate, we're like, oh my gosh, it's like we're getting so much traffic, we're getting so many clicks. It's costing us like 3 cents a click. It's like amazing metrics. Like, this is amazing. We should do this all day long, but we're getting no conversions, right? And why are we getting no conversions? And it's because of the way we had initially configured the audience, right? The AI, very smart at doing what it's told and taking the training that you give it. It's going to take that training. It is going to run with that training, right? Well, what happens when you give it bad training? And so, for example, we have here, I'll put my screen back on here. And so, for example, we were running let me find my screen. I've got a lot of things up here. So we were running let's see here, my Slack, this campaign here, right? So we had selected a couple of audience segment components. I don't need to go into details of what all that meant. And this one here, which is now turned off, which was a home ownership status we were using for weeding, right? This one ended up being, for a variety of reasons that are hidden to us because we're not the ones formally training the data, right? So hidden to us, this one ended up being the one that that the AI really kind of latched onto and said, oh, let's really pay attention. Let's overweight. So this is what it's called in the model. It's called overweight this particular feature. Well, then when we look down here, we see that many of our traffic and views then started to be coming from what was called optimized targeting, right? Well, because up here, the training we had given it turned out to be done incorrectly, frankly. But it sent such a strong signal, the AI said, oh, this must really be what they want. So let's go ahead and do it 7,409 more times, right? And, and charge them, $170 to do that. And so, we start seeing, we're spending now $170 a day on this campaign for garbage traffic, because initially we had set it up and we had done it incorrectly. And so the AI, being what it does its training, it just takes it and it runs 7,000 more times, and it thinks it's doing a good job, right? Because the signals I had initially given it had suggested this was a good job. Now, of course, we've stopped that campaign because it's silly to be able to keep running that campaign. But this, I think, underscores the main point, which is not AI or humans, it's AI and humans, right? Like, you need humans to be able to pay attention to not only the training, but also the output to determine whether or not this is actually doing what it should be doing within the right parameters and the right boundaries. And in this case, it wasn't. Now, had we just trusted the AI, we'd be thousands of dollars into this campaign with zero conversions or relatively few conversions. And as far as the AI concerns, it doesn't matter. It's just views. As far as my bank is concerned, that's real money, right? And so we need to be really mindful of how we're approaching these things, right?
Absolutely. I mean, all marketers, really, even outside of the marketing industry, but everyone knows that there's more to the numbers than just the numbers. And so if an AI program if AI is using those numbers to drive its optimization, it's not always going to work. Like you said, it's humans and AI. I really like the way you said that. Another topic we've talked about is chatbots. Now, we've been talking about chatbots for a very long time. because what do chatbots do? They allow the user to really have a personalized experience. They come to a website or even a social media platform. They have a question. They're looking for an answer. A chatbot allows them to even ask that direct question to get that direct answer. No hunting around the website, for instance, just as one use case example. Now we're talking about AI-powered chatbots that could be used to provide service and support, as well as to assist with lead generation and sales. Jesse, I know this is another key topic for you. How is AI helping with chatbots?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So again, what's cool right now about ChatGPT is how easy it is for somebody to go and type in. The next interface, I think, is voice. Right. And many of us, if you have an Alexa or a Siri or a Google Home, right, we're already that's already another sort of, consumer grade AI. When I ask, Alexa a question and she gives me a response, like it's not like there's a big lookup table that she's going to go find and she's like, oh, that looks like the right answer for that one. It's all being done by AI as well. But voice applications will be I think one of the next big things. We already see this right now. So Domino's Pizza is piloting a technology. It's not rolled out full stop yet. It's being tested, where their voice chatbot allows people to order pizzas via the phone. So you call the number, and instead of getting your 16-year-old grizzled teenager, what do you want? Domino's Pizza, right? What's going to happen is they've got a voice bot connected to their own natural language model, which when you answer, say, I'm looking for pizza. Oh, great. These are the specials that we're running right now. Would you like to hear about them? No, I'm good. I just want a pepperoni, medium, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. Hey, I'm looking at your information here. Looks like you're on, over on Derby Lane. Is that right? Yeah, right. So this level of engagement and interaction, right? And me on the other side of the phone, like, it just sounds like I'm talking to a normal person. Like, I don't know that I'm talking to a bot. And that's exactly what Domino's wants. Domino's doesn't want you to know you're talking to a bot, but their natural language model, their data model, and then their interface is such that they're rolling this out and they're testing it. But here's the crazy thing. The stack that they're using to create this bot is accessible. It's been democratized. If I wanted to build a similar bot, which we have designs to do, you can. And that is one of the other projects on our backlog, is to build a voice-based chatbot for sales forces, because practicing sales can be very difficult. And so, I think Julie, you're right on. Like, chat is going to become even more and more sophisticated. It's going to move out of the realm of type. It's going to move into the realm of voice. And that's going to be its own sort of set of interesting questions.
And I'm so curious, Jesse, to see where that goes, because I know one of the things that I've been looking at personally, and talking with you about, you really turned me on to this idea of using video. And there are some different programs out there that are so cool in creating these video responses. So someone lands on your website, they have questions, or on the reverse side, let's talk about the profitability angle. Someone lands on your website and you want to guide them to where you want them to go, the products or services you want, them to focus on purchase. But using this video and of course, I'm sure there's some AI elements there, depending on the programs, to even predict what questions people have, or what things you can say and do to guide them, to funnel them to where you want them to go through a conversion on your website. Dave, I want to come to you because it's been a minute here. So let's maybe talk through some examples and, what can people do with AI right now, whether, those in our audience, whether you're using it or not, what are some ways that AI can be used and incorporated today?
Great. Yeah, I love that question. I'd love to give people things they can use. Let me see if can I share my screen here? Is this working?
Yep, we can see your screen.
Okay. Yeah. So Ben asked a question in the chat, and let's just plug that right in. So he asked in the chat, do you see marketing roles becoming more or less specialized in the future with the help of AI? So who knows what we'll get, but this will be an example of, we can just plug this thing in. You guys are the marketing experts. So when ChatGPT responds, and of course it's being slow because it's a demo, usually it would have had the thing already typed out by now. But you guys, by the way,
so everyone, just so you know, Dave is at chat.openai.com. So he is logged in, signed in, using ChatGPT. He typed in his question, and Dave, here's the response now that it's giving you.
Yep. So yeah, I asked it, do you see marketing roles becoming more or less specialized in the future with the help of AI, which is the exact question that Ben asked. And it responded, in a few seconds. AI has the potential to automate certain tasks and make them more efficient, which could lead to some marketing roles becoming more specialized in the future. For example, AI could be used for tasks such as data analysis and customer segmentation, allowing marketers to focus on strategy and creative tasks. However, it's also possible that AI could automate certain roles entirely, leading to fewer job opportunities in those areas. Additionally, AI could also increase the demand for roles that require expertise in areas such as data science, machine learning, and marketing automation. I'm not a marketing expert. That sounds like a great question. I wouldn't even tweak it. If we wanted to, we could ask an even more specific question. I don't know if Ben has a follow-up on that, but we could see, what it thinks about that.
Yeah, Ben, I think that's a really great question too, because, we were just talking about this the other day with the three of us and talking about the niche roles that marketers may play at some point. Right now, for instance, one of the things that I've really seen an increase in has been content creation. There are apps out there. Jasper is one that claims that it will, you just type in a few keywords and it will generate all of your content for social media, the text content. And, so I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? Let's try it out. Right. Because we want to see what's out there. And could this be a tool that would be helpful? And let me tell you, I think I'm okay at being able to input keywords, as Jesse was talking about earlier, that entry. But what I was getting out of this program was not great content. And the more specialized your business is or the type of service you provide, the more difficulty that there might be in making sure that content is really personalized to what you're trying to create. The other problem, Dave, that you and I found right away is with blog creation and the amount of things that get plagiarized, so looking at this from the viewpoint that ChatGPT is sourcing from all over the internet, how much of that information is being pulled in a way that is considered plagiarism. And of course, the last thing we want to do is use content that is not our own. Jesse, while Dave's pulling this up, can you talk about have you encountered any of those ethical considerations, whether it's, as you're working on your WordPress, plugin, is that a thought that you and your team have had is, this is not content that's being generated, it's being derived from other places, other sources. And, this is a topic I hear in a lot of podcasts about, kind of the ethical considerations behind using AI.
Yeah, so those are two slightly different questions. One, the ethical question, I think being whether you should use plagiarism or not, and I think the answer is you shouldn't. The second is the quality of response, right? And the reality is, so going back to Dave's comment before, you do. So yes, we don't necessarily have to train it, but you do have to train it if you're going to use it at any kind of scale at some level beyond kind of a novelty. And so, we're, part of what we're doing as we're building our plugin is we're actually using a version of it currently that's not got a nice interface. We're using a version of it currently in production, internal production rather, and assessing the quality of what we're getting. And the reality is we're actually getting pretty good results. We just wrote a 20-page website last week. It was not like long form content. It was, the kind of, picture on left, text on right, but the whole thing we wrote in about an hour. And we wrote it all using our version of the plugin. And that previously would have taken forever. I mean, even just getting the content from the customer for every one of those pages would have taken forever, right? And so the quality of the output so far has been getting better as we engineer better prompts. So I'll say that as we engineer better prompts, it gets better. And, the less, here's what I'll say is the more direction you can give it, the more likely you're going to get a response that is, we'll call it unique, right? The more general you are, the more it's going to have to just pull from the general source of knowledge to come up with a generalized answer. And so part of this is to the question that Ben asked about marketing roles being more or less specialized in the future. I do think a couple things are going to change. One is that you actually are going to have to be really creative. If the best you are as a marketer is copying what everybody else does, you're going to get demolished by everybody else using the same AI doing it. But if you're actually thoughtful and you're innovative, there'll be room for I think really interesting ideas. That's kind of one thought that I have about it. The other thought that I have about this, and I know a lot of people who are going to cringe when I say this, right? But I've said this for a long time, that marketing is a 4-letter word. It's math, right? And I think that's becoming more and more the case. I do think that if you are a content creator, you are going to have to become more techie, maybe not a developer level techie, but you are going to have to start understanding more how technology works, instead of just like, oh, I put this into ChatGPT and I get a result. It's magic. You should, if you're really serious about getting into marketing and you're early in your career, you should really spend some time figuring out how these things work, because you're going to have to know where the boundaries are going to start to lie. And they're going to shift. Even in the next couple of years, they're going to shift. And you're going to have to be able to really navigate that boundary to figure out, well, what actually can you bring to the table that the AI can't bring to the table for you? So I know those are like several questions that I answered in one go. But I think that's kind of how it all is at the moment. There's just a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been enjoying watching what Dave's been doing in the background while you've been talking. Dave, why don't you tell us, maybe like starting from the top with the first blog you created, and talk us through what you've been doing with ChatGPT.
Yeah. So, and Jesse, I think you made some great points there. So, I just started with a really generic prompt, create a blog post about how great AI is. And one of my challenges is, like, we're doing examples here, so it's not, it's not real. But like Jesse said, if this was more, so if this was more specific, then it'll do it like you want, and we'll see that later. But so first, I just started with create a blog post about how great AI is. It pumped out this thing. And like we said before, I would never just post that directly. Like you said, there might be plagiarism issues, who knows what, but that's a great starting point. How long would it take any of us to start? That's the hardest part about writing, right? Is like that first word, that first sentence. So, it's a great like co-pilot. Then I said, make a LinkedIn post promoting that blog post. And I was like, okay, that seems okay. And then I was like, make it funny. Now that did pretty good.
And it took a minute. ChatGPT
is taking over the world, but don't.
ChatGPT, sorry about the tech lags here, but ChatGPT had to think about it. I saw it just sitting there for a minute, and then it came up with something funny.
Yeah. I think it did a great job here. And so what I've actually been doing is doing these kind of things, but I'll tweak it. I'll take the ideas, I'll take the good parts, I'll get rid of the bad parts. And then, as Jesse was talking about, being more specific. So then I said, the same kind of thing, but how great it is and how that's scary. And I've even read this, but to really hone in on what you're really looking for, and then bringing it up a level, then when you're the one operating the thing, you can guide it to get what you want. And you can see in just a few seconds, instead of, typing on a blog post for hours and researching it, you can get these starting points, and you can tweak them. Scott asked a question too about creating so much content that it creates overload, and we've already got overload, right? Like who can read all the emails they get? And so I don't think I'll be able to find it in here, but I had it summarize an email. I was like, hey, this email is too long. I don't want to read it. Give me the summary. And boom, one paragraph. And I could have said, make it 3 sentences, make it, 1 sentence. It does a great job. Here's an example too of it. I'll just put this out, it made a meal plan. And I was like, so first I just started with the meal plan for the next 7 days. And then I said, ensure each dinner has, 2 vegetables, and then it popped out that. So, just examples of going back and forth on it. And I think another cool tool, Jesse, that you could show, I don't know if you can show it, but I love the meeting notes that it takes, the real-time notes. That's something I do a lot when people are talking, where I'm taking notes, and then I always plug them in. And I think you've got a tool where it takes the notes in real time in a meeting and summarizes them. I don't know if there's an opportunity to show that, but I think that could be really useful for people on the.
Yeah, I don't have it pulled up, and I'm afraid I don't know what I would find if I did. That's an off-the-shelf tool called Otter AI. But I do think, you mentioned Scott's question about content fatigue and content creation. He asked another question about bias, which I think is an interesting question, and one that I think there's a lot of opportunity. If you're interested in the machine learning AI space, there is a ton of opportunity to get involved in training data sets, expanding data sets, and to help solve this problem. So, we were showing earlier some of the images that were generated, and I've played with Dolly and Stable Diffusion, Diffusion Web, and all these, right? And what I was surprised by, and actually I probably should have shared this with Julie and Dave, but I didn't, was how narrow the range of options were when I put pictures of myself in, right? I came out looking very Indian most of the time. And it's really like 3 degrees of the same kind of Indian. And like it's kind of funny when you're looking at it, but then you start thinking, well, gosh, the models that this is trained on, right, aren't necessarily tuned with the same data sets that might represent someone like me or someone who looks a little bit differently. And again, that's not trying to make this racial one way or the other. I don't particularly care. I thought it was funny. However, I think, Scott, you're asking a really good question. It goes back to what I was showing with the Google Ads thing. Garbage in, garbage out, or should I say more accurately, data in, data out. So if the model has only ever been trained, for instance, in let's call it English, and then you try and run the model in Turkish, are you going to get something that doesn't make any sense in Turkish because there isn't a corollary word? And so, for example, I was watching a machine learning training, and they were talking about identifying and labeling feature sets. And this particular feature set was images of clothing, right? And this will show you how banal this can seem, right? So you have a boot, which we would look at, and we would call it an ankle boot. Well, there isn't necessarily a corollary word when you start getting into different languages. Well, if you're training the model to recognize this as an ankle boot, and that's the term you're using, well, then somebody else in a different culture gets something, they're not going to recognize, it's not going to register in the same way. So they might not get the right recommendation. They might not even get something that makes sense for what they're trying to accomplish. And so when you're labeling the data, you want to really use numeric values, which is sort of an aside. But Scott, to answer your question, this is actually a really important issue in the domain of AI today. And if you have any inclination at all to get into this field, there, I think, is a lot of room for growth in data sets that are niche specific data sets, and training them in an intelligent way, because it is going to become a more significant problem. Or challenge, I should say. I don't necessarily know it's a problem, but certainly a challenge on a global level.
Yeah, I think that's huge. You know, talking about bias, and there's a ton of work going on there, and there's even interesting things if you ask, like, I don't know, a hot political topic. Should abortion be legal? Should any of those hot button topics we can think of, and what's the answer that ChatGPT would spit out on its own, from just crawling the web, versus what answer does society want it to have? And there's a lot of work going into what answers are this kicking out. And it kind of reminds me of just like when we went through history, in grade school. We're learning that history from an American biased perspective. And I'm not in school now, but I think they talk about Christopher Columbus to my son very differently from how I learned about Christopher Columbus when I was in school. And so, we all have bias built in, and there's, cultural expectations about what do we want these answers to be. And those are all going to go, into the software. And it'll be interesting too, because, there'll be different models where, maybe one model, has a Democrat perspective, and one model has a Republican perspective. One model has a US perspective. One model has a Japanese perspective. And it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out.
Yeah.
Yeah, David, I think that's, go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, I just want to, Scott, I want to chime in with some of Scott's comments here. He says a recent study using AI to screen resumes found that it was screening out all non-American, in quotes, or, kind of those non-traditionally American names in the hiring process. Obviously a huge gap here. And even frankly, humans can't decide on some of these issues. And, some of these debates have been around for a very long time, no end in sight. And so it'll be very interesting to see how, as AI gets trained, how the humans who are the trainers, how they approach this topic. Especially as Scott also points out with some humor, fanny pack in the UK, very different than how we might talk about it here on this webinar. And who gets to make those decisions? Who gets to decide, how Christopher Columbus is talked about or not talked about? And to many, there may be a black and white answer there, but not to everyone, right? And so how does that start getting incorporated into AI? Jesse, I know you wanted to jump in on this, and then I've got another question from Ben that I want to talk about.
Yeah. So going back to Dave's point here about, so I think that this is one of the things that I want to keep reiterating, that AI is not magic, because I think for a lot of people that are just seeing this for the first time and have no idea how AI functionally works, they've never coded one in their lives or seen how one gets coded, it can feel like magic. And so you can be like, oh my gosh, this thing knows all this stuff. And the reality is it doesn't, right? And you have to go into it with the same level of skepticism that you might go into anything else online. The problem is because the natural language processing is so rich, it can fool us into thinking that it's further ahead and knows more, or is more creative, or is thinking more than it actually is. Again, it's a probabilistic model that's getting returned based on previously learned data fed to it by somebody else, right? So what you're going to get is going to be the smartest guess based on what it's learned, right? In the same way that, going back to Dave's analogy with kids, if we only ever taught kids this one particular thing and they get asked a question, they're going to answer with the only answer they've ever been given. If they've never been exposed to any number of things, they're never going to even think to give a different answer, right? And so we need to go into AI eyes open and not treat it like it's this amazing magical thing. It's not the wizard behind the curtain. Or maybe it is the wizard behind the curtain. It's just a dude typing a lot of stuff into a computer, a lot of dudes typing a lot of stuff into a computer and then running statistical models on it. And I think Ben had asked the question about user-generated content. And I think these two things go really closely together, because I suspect what you will start to see is you will start to see more and more AI-generated content being thrown out there. And then potentially it's bots. I mean, we already hear about Twitter bots being on Twitter, like doing different things, right? It's going to be bots talking to bots. And one of the interesting questions is, well, how do you prove you're a human? Right. And then does that even matter? And should it matter? And where should it matter? I mean, if you have your own personal assistant bot and you give it a directive, let's say you're shopping for a new pair of shoes, and you tell your personal assistant bot, hey, I want a new pair of Johnston Murphy loafers. I don't want to spend more than $150. And can you find me the best deal, and just kind of listen on the web for that. And then, the Johnston Murphy bot is out there and it's like, hey, special on Johnston Murphy. And then it talks to my bot. My bot says, hey, are they brown? And this says, yeah, they're brown. Are they loafers? No, they're sneakers. Oh, do you have any loafers? Sure, we got loafers. Can I place the order? Yeah, that'd be great. My budget's $150. Can you make it happen? Yeah, we can make it happen. And then I show up one day and I've got a package from Johnston Murphy with new shoes that, I just authorized the bot at some point to do that. And it worked out with another bot that it was fine and it did it. Like, that to me is a great future. One where though I want something more specialized, like I want to work with Julie on a particular thing. I don't want to talk to Julie's bot. I want to talk to Julie, right? And so how do we then make sure that happens, right? So I think to your question, Ben, about user-generated content versus machine-generated content, there's already a lot of bot content online and even on social networks. That's going to proliferate. I think there'll be the other side of it, which will be, we'll have our own bots too. And then the next question will be, well, how do we then change human interactions? And what is that going to look like? And I think the answer is nobody knows.
Yeah. And I want to dive in there before we talk about what Dave's generating here with these images. Jesse, I completely agree. And I think, the other thing about user-generated content versus AI-generated content, and specifically, Ben, you're talking about social media platforms. I think one of the key words that comes in here for me is authenticity. We talk about authenticity like it's the biggest buzzword that ever existed. And the reality here is, can we train AI, and AI generated content to sound more authentic? Absolutely. But right now, one of the things that is seen as the most authentic, the most genuine content is content created by the end users. And so it makes it more relatable to the audience that are engaging with it. Engagement's another big one, making sure that that's authentic, the personalization, the creativity. The reality is right now, AI isn't quite there yet in being able to create that content that really is going to come across as authentic. It can be perceived right now, especially as all these kinks and all these, challenges that we've talked about, it can really be perceived as impersonal and inauthentic. If Jesse's trying to get a hold of me and he gets my bot, he's going to know within a few minutes that like, that's not Julie, I mean, well, hopefully, I'm not robotic in nature. So, I think that's one of the two of the key things there. I mean, user generated content, you really nailed it on that. Right now, the AI technology that I'm seeing, it's not there yet. However, can AI be used to help predict the types of user-generated content that will become more helpful, and how to, for instance, how to adjust your calls to action to get that engagement you're looking for, how to, kind of that brainstorming element, using AI as a tool in order to take your content and continue to target it in the right ways. So I think that's something that'll be really helpful as well. So Dave, tell us about these images you're creating and what program. Let's mention too the program that you're using right now to create these images.
Sure. So this is Diffusion B. So it's specific for Macintosh to help people easily take out a lot of the work. Before Diffusion B, I was having to type into a terminal, a black screen terminal to get these things out instead of having a nice user interface for it. So and the reason I started doing this was because of I think it was Scott that asked about the bias. And that made me think about, the legal ramifications. And so when we're generating text, where did that text come from? And is that text, what's that word when you steal it from somewhere else?
Plagiarized.
Yeah, is it plagiarized? And so I think it's easy for us to think about that. But I wanted to talk too, there's a lawsuit right now about these images. So, Jesse's talked quite a bit about how the AI is trained in the beginning. Also, going into the bias, that's where the bias comes in, is in the data that you feed it to. When we talked before about learning how to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, that's where that bias is coming in. And so here I thought, like, how can we show that? And I was going to say, hey, make a portrait of Tom Cruise. But I looked through my prompts a little bit and I thought this might kick out something good. So I just copy and pasted this, this long prompt here, which goes into the prompt engineering that Jesse was talking about. And it took a couple minutes to start up, and then about every 30 seconds now, it's pumping out these graphics, and you can see some of them are garbage, especially that first one, but the second one's pretty good. This third one's pretty good, except he's missing an arm. This fourth one's pretty good. And it's just amazing, in a few minutes to be able to pump that out, for any one of us to create an image like this from scratch. I don't know how many hours we're talking, and how long would it take me to even learn a tool that can even create this, months to create something like that, versus just being able to spit this out in this is a ripoff of Toy Story, maybe. And so there's a legal battle, because this tool, learned how to do that because it looked at all the Toy Story images. And so now it understands, who Woody is. It understands, Disney, it understands Pixar. And pretty much I told this tool, hey, rip them off. And the tool went ahead and did that. And so there's a legal battle right now in the United Kingdom, to try to figure some of this stuff out, who owns this stuff, who should be compensated, kind of like we've seen in the music industry, where Spotify, all these artists get paid for their work, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
I think we said it over and over today, don't use text and don't use images that haven't been reviewed by people, so that you understand, what's being put out there in the world by these tools today.
Yeah, a lot of copyright and trademark challenges ahead. Dave, you nailed it. And I know we're coming up on the end of our time here, so I want to wrap up by answering one final question. Scott has asked, will there be this replay available? Yes, Scott. Everyone who registered, we will send you a link to the recording of this webinar. Also going to ask, let us know, give us some feedback. We'd love to know, would you like more content like this? Was this helpful today? Are there specifics you'd like to have us pull experts in on to talk about as it relates to AI? And just anything that you think would be helpful to our community, our global community at large, as we really, network on this topic together. And before we go, Scott, also want to answer your question about additional resources. Jesse and Dave, real quick. Jesse, I'll start with you. I'd love to hear, what are some of the sources that you're going to right now, Jesse, as far as podcasts, books? I don't know that there are books yet, but podcasts and further reading online. What are your go-to sources?
Yeah, so I posted one in the chat window there. And this one is actually one that our project manager really, really liked. So she had very little machine learning background. And so she was trying to understand everything I was talking about. So this was a course that where she started with these courses to start understanding. And then she just completed her first machine learning project yesterday. So we were all very, very proud of her. It was a little training example. So I would start with something like that. And then really it's going to depend on what your role is. Certainly anyone that's connected to this should be on the mailing list. We're planning to put together some of our own resources that are more targeted to like the business generalist, because there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of content. There's no way we could cover it in the time that we've got today. But I would start with something like that. And then depending on your role, I would go and look at Coursera. There are a lot of really great courses on Coursera. Anything with Andrew Ng is going to be great. And then we also buy a lot of courses on Udemy, and Udemy is more practical. Coursera is more academic. So depends on kind of what you like, but I would start with the deep learning, and I would definitely make sure you look at deep learning and neural networks. You might have to work up to that, but deep learning and neural networks are where the magic happens.
Awesome, Jesse. Thank you. Dave, what about you? Podcasts, websites, where are you getting your info?
Man, I would just hop in and just try it. If you thought anything here was interesting, go and hop in, get Diffusion B, download it, play with it, go to ChatGPT and sign up. If not, don't worry about it. I think the speed at which these things are built into tools we already use, like Canva, like my email program, I think that's all coming, as fast as possible in 2023. These people have all been hit with feature requests to incorporate these tools. The value is immense. So, I mean, pick your thing. If you want to read about it and learn about it at a high level, do that. If you thought anything here was interesting, try that. If not, just don't worry about it, because this stuff is all going to be, are into tools that you don't even know it's in there, in a short order here.
Yep. As we like to say, like it or not, you better start liking it because it is here to stay. Guys, thank you so much for participating on this roundtable conversation today. Thanks to all of you in our audience. Again, we're going to send out an email with the replay link, and please respond to that email. Give us some feedback. Let us know if you got something out of today's conversation and what you might like, if you would like to have further conversations on AI. Guys, thank you so much. We'll see you next time.